Okay, hello everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce today Carol Szeto. She was the Stern MBA class of 2000 and is currently the CEO of Save the Children in Hong Kong. She's had 12 years in the nonprofit sector and has a very interesting career path leading up to her work in the nonprofit area. She's had amazing experiences managing $500 million in grant portfolio in India, as well as working with the Indian government and doing a 6-month stint on malaria control in Ghana. She has experience in the corporate sector as well, including big pharma as well as consulting. So thank you for joining us today, Carol.
You're very welcome. Nice to meet you, Vivian.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so you've gone from chemical engineering to consulting to big pharma to nonprofit. It's very interesting, career changes. Can you tell us a bit more about your career journey?
Sure. I know I have quite an unusual career journey. I started out in an undergraduate degree. I actually studied chemical engineering. So my first job out of university was actually working in research and development, R&D at Merck. So I was working in pharmaceuticals then. And so after a number of years, then I decided to get my MBA at Stern. And then coming out of the business school, I did a number of years in management consulting, eventually then went back to the corporate side to Pfizer, and first in an internal consulting position and then to marketing. And that was a very interesting, actually, corporate philanthropy experience that Pfizer sent me to live and work in Africa for a little while,
Wow.
for 6 months. And that was my life-changing moment, and it prompted my career change into nonprofit. So I left New York and went to Switzerland for 10 years. And then I came back to Hong Kong and have been leading Save the Children Hong Kong for the last 2 years. So my career journey, over 25 years now, has been a bit half and half in the private and the nonprofit sectors.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, getting the opportunity to work in Africa is something that, very little people have. And you say that was actually what sparked your career change. So can you tell us a bit more about, or give us some insights on what prompted your career changes?
Sure. I think I'm a very keen learner. So usually I stay in a job and it gets to a point where I feel that I have, I know what I'm doing, and I want to push myself to the next level. That's usually what prompted me to change. At Merck, it was like that. I did engineering, did R&D for a number of years, and I knew that I didn't want to get a PhD. That would have led me down a very different path. So I decided to go to business school to get different exposure. And then at Pfizer, within Pfizer, also changed jobs a few times because I'm always pushing myself to learn different things. I think different people pick different career paths. Some people would like to stay in the same field and you go very deep in your experience. So you become a specialist. There are other people like me. I'm more of a generalist. I do move around laterally a number of times and eventually, climbed up. I think it depends on the person. For me, it's always wanting to learn something new.
That's amazing. I think a lot of people should also learn from, your ability and your want to be able to learn more, because that's obviously, been a big success factor in your entire career. So you've talked about all these organizations. You worked at 6 different organizations in your career to date. I think a lot of recent alumni also, switch jobs frequently for career or for compensation. Do you have any views as to when one should, stick it out and ride it out, or start to look for opportunities outside?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a set formula. It's hard to say, okay, you should stay in your job for so long, for 1 year, 2 years. At the beginning of my career, I did tend to change every other year because I got bored. But it really depends on the person. Some people actually like to stay in a position or at a firm for a very long time. It seems like I think with the younger generation, people are not going to stay for 10 and 20 years in an organization. And it's okay to change, and it's okay to explore. I think it really depends on the person. There's no right or wrong answer how long you should stay in a certain place. I do think that from a recruiter point of view, though, I would encourage people to stay a little bit longer, because jumping, when you see in a CV that someone jumps, every year, like very, very frequently, it does raise questions. So I think from a employer point of view, I would say, give it a try. Every single job for me, it's a stepping stone. You learn something, whether it's fulfilling or not fulfilling, challenging or not, you always learn something. So I would say, keep exploring.
Yeah, that's I think that's really good advice, especially for, alumni, no matter the age, for people who are just graduated or for people who have been at their jobs for a while. I think, like you said, there's no set formula. So it really depends on what that person wants. And, it's amazing that you knew what you wanted to get out of each role at each different stage. And you had mentioned about going to Stern for an MBA, and that was also, quite a pivotal point in your career. What was your thought process in deciding to leave, a career in engineering and then apply for Stern MBA? And, at Stern, why did you choose strategy consulting as your next step?
Mm-hmm. Vivian, you just mentioned that I seem to always know what I want to do. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I didn't.
Yeah.
When I was an engineer, I loved it. I was good at math and sciences. That's why I went into the field. After the 4 years, and I realized that I'm getting a little bit bored. If I only have my bachelor's degree, I won't go very far. But I'm not sure to get a PhD and stay in this field, very scientific field for a very long time. And it was actually serendipity. I went with my friend's husband, and he was studying at Stern with part-time MBA. So out of curiosity, one weekend I sat in on the class, and that was eye-opening for me. I was like, oh wow, the education is so different, actually. Learning about business, different aspects of business. Because in engineering, it's a lot more black and white. And that's why I decided to go to business school, to actually learn something different, something new. And then when I was at Stern, I got exposed to a lot of different, disciplines. I still didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I majored in finance, a little bit because of the peer pressure, I have to say. Because Stern is very famous for finance, and many people are going to that field. I say, I'm good at math, I can totally do that. So I majored in it, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I came to know, learn about management consulting. I interviewed for it. And I thought, oh, this industry will give me very good exposure to different disciplines. And that's what I did. So I went into it.
That's amazing. So maybe, like you said, at the moment you didn't know what you wanted, but at each point it was like a stepping stone, as you said, leading to the next one. So while you were at NYU, what were some of the most valuable courses or lessons that you took from it? And how did it prepare you for, the changes in the role and eventually nonprofit?
I really appreciated my education at NYU. I think the business degree really taught me about different disciplines. You learn about finance and marketing. There was a course on operations management, about organizational changes and organizational development. And every single one of those aspects has prepared me for what I end up doing, which is very much a general management role. So I can't say any particular course that really was very important, but because they were all important. I think one aspect about business school is teamwork. In business school, you have to work in projects with different people. For me, that was very important. I think whether you are in private sector or in the nonprofit sectors, more and more you have to work in teams. You have to be able to work with people from different disciplines and different personalities and different interests. So getting that teamwork down and knowing how to work with different people is very important.
Yeah. So more definitely on the diversity of courses and diversity of thought that you got from NYU. I think that really can speak to a lot of alumni too. I'm sure they feel that way about their time at NYU too. So I'm very curious, kind of bridging towards the second part of your career in terms of nonprofit. You mentioned that you spent, time living and working in Ghana. And I understand that it's a pivotal moment in your career. What was it like to live in Africa, and what did you do there?
Mm. So I participated in Pfizer's Global Health Fellows Program. It is a very generous employee volunteering program. So every half a year, they will choose, you can apply and they will choose 20, 25 people, and they match you with NGOs around the world to work on global health issues. I was living in New York then for many years. And so to be sent to Ghana in West Africa was a new experience for me.
Yeah.
It was really eye-opening, I have to say. I grew up in Hong Kong and then spent a number of years in Toronto and in the US. And I have never lived in Africa before.
Yeah.
My project there was on malaria control. Malaria is actually one of the top killers of children under 5 years old. Many people don't know that. In Asia, you don't hear very much about malaria. Unfortunately, every 2 minutes or so, a child dies from malaria. So it's a very severe death threatening disease. And many people in Africa may take it for granted. They see the symptoms. It's kind of like a flu. You get a headache, you get high fever, you get fatigue, and they don't do anything about it. So the project is actually to train people and help them understand, if you have these symptoms, you have to seek medical advice. You have to go to the doctors. There are also some medicines and also even some over-the-counter medicines that you can take. So that project for me was very meaningful. And the first time living in Africa, seeing the living conditions there, it's very, very different from environments that I'm used to. That really made me think after the 6 months experience that what I wanted to do for my career for the rest of my life. I realized that so much of what I have learned previously, the analytical skills, the skills in working with people, in marketing, all those skills and knowledge I can actually apply in the nonprofit world. And actually the work felt much more meaningful to me. And that's why I made the career change.
That's amazing. I think, that's not an experience that anyone will easily have. And for you to have made the move from, New York to Ghana, it must have been such a culture shock at first. Like, I'm also very curious, like how did you handle that culture shock, and how did you, because obviously there must have been a gap between, you and then training the locals as well. How did you overcome that barrier to really get the information across?
It was very much a cultural shock to me. Working in Africa, first thing I learned was that things go slowly. So you can call a meeting and you can come in an hour late. And that was the norm. People would slowly stroll in and you cannot rush things. So for me, coming from New York, that was I've always felt that I was like banging my head against the wall. Of course, I was working with a local nonprofit. So I'm working with people, from that culture, and they will always teach me and tell me how things run. First couple of months, I have to admit, it was difficult. I think after I got used to it, I realized that it was not about me changing other people and telling them what is the right way of working and working more efficiently. And the person that needed to change was me. It was myself. That was the biggest learning for me, actually. It's not about, this is the first world way of working and let me impose my standards and ways of working onto you. You have to respect other people's cultures and the way of working. And you have to integrate yourself. You have to put yourself into other people's shoes. And only by doing so, you can actually work more effectively. So I think I learned so much about myself from that experience. And then when I went back to New York, because after the 6 month secondment,
Mhm.
went back to my old job. Then I experienced a reverse cultural shock. And that was hard too. But of course,
Yeah.
when I stayed for a couple of months and decided, nope, I'm going to drop everything
Yeah.
in private sector, in pharmaceuticals, everything that I have
Yeah.
known before, because I'm going to chase after a different career, a different
Yeah.
goal. And I want to give it a try in nonprofits.
That's amazing. I mean, I really, really like how you said, the change is not you trying to change other people's thought. It's you conforming your way of thinking to other people so you can get the message across. I think no matter if it's nonprofit or actually any industry, that advice is golden. But so you also worked in Switzerland for a bit. What prompted you to make the switch from the private sector to working in nonprofits in Switzerland?
When I was in Ghana, I happened to come across a conference, and it was hosted by the Global Fund to fight AIDS, HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. So that's how I learned about the organization. It's actually the biggest financier of these infectious diseases. So I applied for my job. In fact, it was a 6-month maternity leave coverage position. So I got that job. I remember going back to the US, and I was really deliberating, do I change a career or not? Am I crazy? To drop everything, my comfort zone, living in New York, all my best friends there, the private sector, pharmaceuticals, everything that I knew so well. And I remember talking to my friends and, talking through it and realizing that, what, I'm going to give it a try, because I said I want to work in nonprofits. If, even if it's for 6 months, if it doesn't work out at the end, I realize that I didn't like it, I can always come back to pharmaceuticals. But I don't want to look back and think, what if I had taken that job? Sounds like a crazy idea to drop everything and go to Europe and live in Geneva. But I didn't want to, give up that opportunity. So then I joined the Global Fund for 2 years. I ended up staying there for 2 years, and my first position was in the strategy department. So because I came from management consulting before, that also was easy for me, even though it's a completely different sector and industry. It's global health. I could enter that more easily. And after a couple of years at the Global Fund, then I went to an organization called Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. You may hear about it now because of COVID, actually, the COVAX, giving vaccines. So the business model of that organization is very similar. You get money from a lot of governments and also private foundations. You channel that through Gavi, and then they support and they help the developing countries. So while I was at Gavi, I also had a number of positions managing different vaccine portfolio. And right before I returned to Hong Kong, I was managing India, the grant portfolio there.
That's amazing. I mean, I think it's amazing how you were able to leverage on your experience from NYU to, choosing management consulting and then pivoting that into a role in Switzerland. But also it's even more amazing that, how you overcame the uncertainty of switching to nonprofit is really, one, your passion, for the cause, but two, equally as important, which I think is very relevant for a lot of alumni, is having a backup plan, knowing that, okay, if this doesn't work out, you can always fall back onto going back to Pfizer. So more balancing like your dreams and aspirations with, the reality as well.
That's right. I think many of my friends might describe me as risk averse. So for me to drop everything to take up a 6-month maternity leave position in Switzerland was quite drastic. But it's believing in what I believed in. Saving lives, children, and infectious disease, health issues. That's what I wanted to do.
That's amazing. So after after you spent 10 years over there, you decided to come back to Hong Kong. How did you decide to, choose on joining Save the Children Hong Kong as opposed to, other nonprofits?
that was also quite a change for me. 2 years ago, I came back to Hong Kong, and I have
Right.
lived here for more than 30 years, actually.
Another culture shock.
Another cultural shock. That's right.
Yeah.
I have family here, and actually, my
Yeah.
main reason for coming back is because of family. So I
Right.
decided to move closer to Asia. Actually, never did I think that I would end up in Hong Kong because
Mm.
I work in nonprofits. What is there to do? I came across this position at Save the Children. I've known this organization for a very long time. When I was studying in the States and was in my 20s, I started sponsoring children, and it was through Save the Children. It was just direct mail.
Yeah.
In fact, my mom, when I was little in Hong Kong, she used to sponsor children. So that concept really stayed with me. It's like, oh, that's really nice actually to be able to support underprivileged children in Africa and other
Mm.
places. So I came across the opportunity in when I was in my 20s, when I had the
Mm.
means, I started sponsoring children.
Yeah.
So I thought it just came full circle. It was so nice when I came across the CEO opportunity in Hong Kong, and now I get to lead this organization.
So that's amazing that, everything fell back into place as well as coming back to Hong Kong. It's been 2 years at the role. Tell me more about the most fulfilling and enjoyable moment that you've had. And maybe obviously working in a nonprofit, there comes times where it's not so enjoyable. What were the most frustrating experiences?
I think having been in nonprofit for like 12 years now, so many times I would say I would recall, fulfilling moments. When I was managing India, when I was at Gavi, I went to many places in India. Actually, I would go there every 2 months from Switzerland. I have gone to the dirtiest places, in the urban slums,
Yeah.
in the rural villages, and some places that I thought was poorer and more dirtier than what I've seen in Africa. And that was, really humbling for me.
Yeah.
I remember one time going to a dump site, trash dump. So it was this huge area in the center of the city. So every morning the dump trucks will come, and there were hundreds of families that live right around the area. And every morning they rush there to pick out the rubbish, to sort out the metals and the cloth, the rags, things that they could resell. So that was a moment that I remember so well, being on the dump site. And I realized, like, what I was doing in my previous job was managing all these vaccines portfolios. We were introducing measles and rubella vaccine, a pneumonia vaccine for babies, a diarrhea vaccine. Diarrhea is also actually one of the top killers of children under 5. And because of what I did, and my colleagues, I was working with WHO, I was working with UNICEF, with the Indian government, and everyone was working so hard to really bring the vaccines to the most underprivileged, most marginalized children of the country. And that made me very, feel good.
Yeah.
That was so gratifying to see these families that we were helping, and they were living in the dump sites. So India and then seeing all the poverty situation there has really made an impact. And when I came back to Hong Kong, I came back right before COVID, 2 years ago. For me, it was very fulfilling. The first couple of months, of course, everyone was so shocked. We experienced it first before many other parts of the world.
Yeah.
We really didn't know what to do. Remember, there was a time when there was a shortage of masks and
Yes.
everything else, and then the schools were closed. So my organization, we have about 50 people. We were scrambling to look for adult masks and children's masks. And that was even harder to get your hands on. And we basically turned ourselves into a packaging factory one time, because then we bought, with some donations, and we bought some adult and children's masks, and we repack them into smaller packages, and we would give them out to underprivileged families. That was a very fulfilling experience as well, because we had never done local emergency relief like that in Hong Kong, out of all places. So that was gratifying. You asked me about the most
Yeah.
frustrating experience in nonprofits. Um, for me, has been disheartening that now I lead Save the Children Hong Kong, and there are
Hmm.
many times, unfortunately, I find some people attacking and boycotting NGOs.
Okay.
Sometimes on the social media they will pick out something. I think because of the social and political environment and
Right.
what Hong Kong has gone through, there are many people who are very angry, and they will
Yes.
pick up things to attack you for it. And so for me to lead an NGO, lead a charity organization, and all we are trying to do is to do good, and it's actually to help the most underprivileged people.
Yeah.
And when I see people attacking you for no reason, and twist your words, and then they will call on people to boycott you, to leave angry emojis on your Facebook, that uh,
Yeah.
that for me, I have to say, is the most frustrating part, because I know how I and all my staff members and so many colleagues in the sector are
Hmm.
just working so hard actually to
Yes.
do good. So to be attacked for what you do,
Yeah.
it feels very unfair.
Yeah. So, thank you for sharing that. I think there were a lot of deep messages in that, in what you just said. And I think my next question would be, you mentioned about how the political unrest in Hong Kong has maybe caused some, negative, things that have gone to your team and your team's way. How do you manage, how do you stay positive getting all of this, negativity?
That's a good question. Um, we have to stay positive.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I always remind myself and my team members.
Mm,
I can speak for myself. I'm
mm,
doing what I do because I truly believe that everybody has the power and the
mm,
responsibility to make a difference.
mm,
And that's why I chose my career path.
mm,
Whatever little bit that I can do, I can contribute.
mm.
Unfortunately, we can't fly now. I haven't flown for 2 years, which is very unusual for me and for many
Yeah.
people. I think
Yeah.
when I see the impact we make on the ground, usually it's a lot more fulfilling, because you actually
Mm,
see, firsthand what you're doing in the field. But despite all that, I believe in what I do, and I always
yeah.
have to remind myself that, and remind my staff, don't listen to all these things. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what people will say. People will still say whatever they want. There
Yeah.
are people who call to our donor services line and start to attack you and all that. And you just have to take it with stride.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if people don't want to listen, let it be. There
Yeah.
are so many people that will support us and believe in us and believe that we're making an impact. And we make sure that we are actually, we take the time to tell people the impact that we are making on children. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah. I think that's really important, like not just from your strategy and management consulting role where you're able to learn about, as you mentioned, your time at NYU marketing and operations and finance and all of that, but how you're able to lead as upper management, as a
Mm.
CEO. You have to be like the 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 foundation for the company. You have to believe it in order to lead your people. Like you have to be strong for them in order for them to, phase out the negativity. So, that is really amazing to hear. It must be, it must get really tough sometimes. So
It is sometimes.
yeah, but so in terms of, diversity and inclusion, you've been abroad to so many places and you speak a lot about how your time abroad has shaped your journey. How has diversity played a role in your experience growing up, and how does that translate into your current work?
Mm. I really have been very, very privileged. Growing up in Hong Kong, then went to Toronto, uh, to US, and then especially since I joined a nonprofit field, I've been all over and every continent, and I've been to so many different countries. Um, that exposure has given me also a better appreciation for working with people from different cultures. I'm a strong believer in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm.
I think it gets to a point where I have to work in a diverse environment. If you put me in a place where just one nationality, I will not be
Yeah.
happy. I would not know how to operate.
Yeah.
When I talk to my staff, I'm also always stressing the importance of diversity, because people from different walks of life, people from different experiences, from different cultures, maybe you look at things differently. But the beauty of teamwork and cross-functional teamwork is that when you put all these people together at the table, you come up with better and brighter solutions. And I truly believe in that. Some people might think that diversity, working with diversity is difficult. It does take more work. It does take more efforts, because
Mm-hmm.
you need to be open-minded. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to actually put yourself in other people's positions and think
Mm-hmm.
like they do,
Mm-hmm.
and have the open-mindedness, so you don't get so set in the ways. It takes more efforts, but I believe the outcome is greater when you are able to work in a diverse environment.
Mm. And that also, again, going full circle, that also went along with what you had mentioned and your time in Ghana, of how the important thing is not to conform others, but to change your mindset so you can
Yes,
stand from their perspective to teach them. I guess diversity and thinking from, having empathy and thinking from the other perspective is like a muscle that you need to constantly stretch, or else it will just get really tight and, you can't be as like agile.
that's right. You almost have to train yourself with that, and
Yeah.
maybe sometimes it feels difficult, challenging. I
Yeah.
I had a project. Actually, one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite projects was
Mm-hmm.
a private-public partnership. It
Okay.
was from Gavi side, then
Yeah.
we had the Indian government, and then we have Unilever. So it was
Mm.
co-promoting immunization and hand washing with soap.
Yeah.
And the organization and private sector companies think very differently and work very differently. And there were a lot of teething problems, a lot of a dialogue that took place. But at the end, I think that the project was brilliant, because we were able to put together people with different backgrounds and expertise together to make it work.
That's amazing. Already answered my next question. So,
Oh.
um, I think, you had said, working in a private and public kind of project, there needs to be different skill sets as well. It's very different working in private sector and, the nonprofit. Could you give us, for those alumni who may be interested in learning more about what it's like, what it takes to work in a nonprofit industry, do you have like a list of, a skill or a personality checklist that you think is critical in being successful in nonprofit? And what private sector skills do you think can translate into nonprofit?
That's a very good question. I don't have a checklist. I think I have demonstrated that there are so many skills that are transferable from the private sector. Um, Analytical skills, I was trained as an engineer.
Hmm.
Till now, I'm still a little bit nerdy in a way that I love to dig into data.
Yeah.
Communication skills, being able to
Mm.
communicate with different people,
Mm.
relationship building and teamwork skills. All these things are important. In the nonprofit sector, sometimes the language is just different.
Mm.
It's like another world, but actually the skills that enable someone to be successful in what they do, they are the same. In private sector, we may call it marketing, brand building. In nonprofit, at the community level, we'll call it social mobilization. It's
Mm.
all about actually working with the community members, even at the village level, being able to influence them and communicate with them about the risks and benefits of doing something so that they understand. So it's all about communication and actually uh, uh, help, driving that social and behavioral change. So
Mm.
I think so many skills are important from the private sector, that can be transferred to the nonprofit work.
Mm. And then, so many, as you said, many alumni want to give back to the community and to the society. Is joining a nonprofit, at any stage of the life cycle equally as fulfilling, or have you found that a switch from the private sector to a specific department in nonprofit to be a more successful way to give back to the community?
It's very interesting. I think now, especially what's happening around the world, we hear about phenomena like the Great Resignation, the Great
Yes.
Shuffle. In many parts of the world, especially with COVID, I think probably many people do think, is my job fulfilling? Do I make a change? I want to give back. How do I give back? I think back to my experience. Actually, when I deliberated on my the decision to move to nonprofit, I spoke with a number of people. One of them I remember very well. He was a private sector CFO at a very well-known organization. And he also sat on many boards. And then I was so looking forward to talking to him and say, I just came back from Ghana, had all these experiences. What do you think? You sat on these boards. What is it like? And he gave me every reason not to take that job in Switzerland. He told me, Carol, I have seen many times that people try to change mid-career. In the nonprofit world, there are many people who grow up in the field. You start out, at the entry level, and you grow up, in the sector.
Yeah.
And I've seen people that are senior executives, and they go in at the board level, or at the management level, and it's easier to influence things. I have never seen it work in mid-career, and it's very difficult. And he said, you know what, when it comes to the nonprofit, especially in the global side of things, like the UN, you have so many voices. It's all about the diplomacy. It's not about what's doing what is right or wrong, but you just dumb it down to the lowest denominator, and you just have to come to consensus, and that's how you work. So I remember being very demotivated after that call. It was completely unexpected.
Yeah.
But then I talked to someone else, a lady who told me, Carol, there are very few people who have experienced what you have experienced in Ghana. Treasure that moment. Treasure how you're feeling right now. If you believe this is the opportunity you want to go for, then go for it. Do it and don't look back. So I got all kinds of advices from people. And I think what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, you have to make the decision for yourself. I have already shown that you can make it work also in mid-career. Yes, some people decide to, climb the career ladder in the private sector, and then you get on the board sometime later on in life. Some people at the entry level, they decide to go into nonprofit. But mid-career can also work. And it depends on what motivates you at that particular point in time, and what drives you to do what you do. So I have to say, if you want to give back, if you want to consider going to nonprofit, then give it a try. I have seen people actually now, I get many applicants, and many people actually from private sector that apply to our jobs. But sometimes and then I see them come and go, because they try for a while, for a year or so, they say, this is not for me, I don't like the culture. And every organization is different too. And then they go back to private sector. And I have seen other people that have actually made it work. They found what they like to do, and they like that, being able to give back. So again, there's no formula, I would say. It's just finding that right opportunity and what feels right for you. Yeah,
I guess almost in a sense, if a person wants to switch, they have to take inventory of their skill sets, what they want, know what they want, but also, as you did, kind of have a risk and reward balance as to if I take this step, will it make sense for me, and is the reward that I'm getting it, or is what I'm getting out of it something that's fulfilling for myself.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'd like to also move on to now sort of the industry trend in nonprofit, as well as speaking about Save the Children specifically. So, yeah, because of COVID, we have, and actually not because of COVID, and also because of, COP26 and all of the environmental things that's been going on. ESG is like the kind of the buzzword for a lot of private companies. They're always talking about how they're doing in ESG and all of that. How does that affect your organization? And do you have any views on the trends of these corporates trying to become more ESG and how that shift can affect nonprofits?
Definitely, I welcome that. I welcome all the discussions around ESG. I see many companies talking about that. And some are more sincere and really active in pursuing these the ESG agenda. For the nonprofits is a good thing. I mean, for us, we always talk about the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, right? So where we work, in reducing the poverty, reducing global hunger, the health, education, all that is sustainability. So the more people we can involve in the cross sectors, the better it is. SDG 17 is about partnerships, private and public partnerships. So for me, I think it's a brilliant thing. The issues around the world are so significant that you really need people from, with experience and expertise from different backgrounds, from different sectors. So the private and the public and the nonprofit sectors can really work together. So I really welcome that.
Yeah. And so, speaking of COVID, how has the last 2 years in Hong Kong with the COVID situation affected the operations of Save the Children?
Quite significantly, in a good way, in a bad way. I think the whole world was shaken up so much by COVID. It's so crazy what has happened in the last 2 years. So in the settings that we work in, especially in many developing countries, the poorest have gone into extreme poverty. You see, hunger issues, malnutrition issues, a lot of agendas that we have been working on got a setback, got delayed because of COVID, because everything has paused. For example, we work in education. Over a year ago, Save the Children did a global survey in 46 countries, over 45,000 people, parents, caregivers, and also children that we work with. And we interviewed them to understand the impact of COVID on children. And it was very devastating. We see survey findings like 8 out of 10 children, because schools have closed and a lot of the children are in developing country settings, that they have learned little or nothing at all. So they're falling behind in their learning. In many homes, people are forced, because of lockdown, there are child protection issues. Child abuse cases have gone up. We also know that many underprivileged families, they don't get to access healthcare. So the issues are very devastating. From a positive point of view, because we need to actually actively address these issues. So Save the Children, a whole global movement, we have 120 offices. We became closer because you can no longer work in an isolated way, office by office. The whole COVID actually brought our whole global movement together because we are so focused in solving these issues that we are seeing as an impact of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think, difficult for anyone in this environment, but as you said, there's pros and cons to the situation, but it's great to hear that, Save the Children is making the most out of the situation and being able to still operate given how everything is.
I think the other positive note is that we see many generous people wanting to help.
Yes.
Because they understand the severity of the issues. So we see supporters that, asking like, how can we help? How can we contribute? And so that's also a positive thing.
Yeah, more people, more awareness that's being gathered because of the situation. And then I think the last, for those people who are watching, how can people get involved in Save the Children?
There are so many ways. I'm always very touched by our supporters. There are many people will give financial support. We always welcome that. Right now, the economic environment is difficult. There are people who lend them out the skills, volunteer with what we do. There are so many business skills actually that you can use to help with the nonprofit. We have supporters that sponsor children, like I myself am a child sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many children in developing countries that need support. We do work in Hong Kong and also around the world. So there are many different ways just to reach out is what I encourage people to do. Whether it's financial support, whether it's dedicating your time, whether it's giving some advices or actually spending time with us, volunteering, all those things are very welcomed.
Mm. Got it. And then I guess as a closing question, do you have any words of advice for, alumni in Hong Kong, either in career, nonprofit, or life in general?
I think when I talk to young people, I always encourage them to keep an open mind, broaden your horizon, and keep exploring. As you have seen from my own career path, I changed quite a bit. And I just kept exploring. It took me a while to actually find what I was passionate about. And that's absolutely okay. If you don't know yet, then keep exploring. And for alumni, they are in their mid-career maybe, that many of you may also be thinking about your next steps. You can please give nonprofits a try. I think is a very fulfilling career path also for many.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Carol. I'm sure everyone who's watching has learned so much from your experience and your wise words of advice. And just thank you again for your time and the opportunity.
Thank you, Vivian. My pleasure.
Thank you.